Hi, everyone, and welcome to PharmaTalks, the podcast where we have honest, practical conversations with the people who are genuinely interested and in reshaping how pharma operates. So they are people from our industry and they are helping us to evolve and to be different. My name is Nataliya Andreychuk. I'm CEO of V7. And today I'm joined by someone I had the pleasure to meet recently in Brussels in Next Medical Summit, which was, by the way, the first time in Brussels, led by Darius Safarik. So Laragh De Bhulbh is a leadership coach, strategy consultant, very specific and very important mission, breaking down silos, building genuine cross-operational communication in medical affairs. Lara, you are the founder of Wolf Medicals. You are having more than 15 years of global experience working with medical affairs and brand teams. And also, you are lecturing on strategy, coaching on leadership at King's College. Lara, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Natalia, and thank you for having me. So it was lovely meeting you back at the Next Medical Festival in January, and I'm delighted to be here. So as you mentioned, I've spent over 15 years of my career working in pharma, which I transitioned to after working in academia. I loved doing what I did in medical affairs, but I noticed there were a couple of bottlenecks along the way, and those included cross-functional communication and strategic thinking. When strategy clicked for me about 5 years in, I also happened to have the unique opportunity of working on that high-performing cross-functional brand team. And I really believe that having that experience of working on a high-performing cross-functional brand team where you can do things faster and you can go further and create better impact for patients, everybody deserves that opportunity. And so that drives an awful lot of what I do. And I do that through building those strategic thinking capabilities and opening communication up within pharmaceutical brand teams.
This is a very interesting angle of our work. So, and I can believe how busy you are and how popular with all the coaching programs you have and meeting such an interesting people. I want to give a little bit more specific angle to our conversation. So today we will be talking about something that sounds incredibly hard, incredibly difficult in practice. So getting different functions inside medical affairs and totally inside pharma organization together to work on the problem of treating a patient, of giving us more relevant and needed information in the time when we are looking for this. So, Lara, please. So, the first question from my side will be, so medical affairs evolution. Medical affairs has changed, but has the rest of the organization caught up with this change?
That's a great question, Natalia. Definitely, you're right. Medical affairs is evolving. And as we saw with the McKinsey's vision for 25 and then 2030, and also MAPS published their vision for medical affairs, and it shows medical affairs as that strategic pillar within the organization alongside R&D and commercial and market access. Depending on the company, and then depending on the team, medical affairs is on that journey. But you're right, some of the functions aren't quite there with them. And I think that's down to the fact that traditionally medical was that support function and therefore was heavily involved in the marketing and sales activities. So as medical shifts to that strategic piece, there isn't anyone to take up that slack. So medical is still expected to continue on in that supportive role, supporting marketing with creating the materials or reviewing the materials and also kind of supporting them and briefing speakers. But I think what needs to be done is teams need to look at it as a cross-functional whole and see, right, what is it as a team we are trying to achieve? And now, how does each function contribute to that overall? Because there are times when medical needs to drive the strategy along with marketing, but it just depends. It might depend on the life cycle, the project, and so therefore communication is really, really key.
It's very interesting answer because this is actually keeping us in medical affairs to go the extra mile from this, rather convenient situation we have had over the decades. So now this extra miles means, so we are crossing the roads with commercial team very closely, and we strategically connected, and we are monitoring the situation and pivoting with the science and the market development together. So that's just a great example. So I believe you have a lot of examples of these shifts and a lot of successful cases. So I will start again with this collaboration. The collaboration means a lot. That means this is the right angle to look at the problem. Cross-functional collaboration means we need to kill the silos. The major problem, the silos between medical and commercial, why it's more dangerous that we can admit, than even the most leadership can admit today. Let's talk about that. What is your experience about these silos? So do we have any breakthrough recently?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing, Natalia, is very often when I'm talking to teams, I hear them saying, no, our cross-functional team gets on fine. So everybody's saying everything is fine and it's working well. So most teams work okay, but they could work much better. And when you truly break down the silos, it means that teams, as I said, can go further and they can go faster because you're all on the same page. It allows you to have that open discussion that you can disagree, but you can do in a safe environment. So the difference was, for example, when I worked on a cross-functional team that maybe wasn't high performing, but we worked okay, we did our projects, we communicated, but it didn't flow as easily as it could have. And so you get miscommunication and frustration and things slow down. When I worked on a high-performing team, we had an awful lot of psychological safety or trust within our team, which meant that if we had a challenge, we aired it, we openly discussed it. And then we were able to align more quickly, which meant we were able to get to a solution. So we didn't all have to agree all the time, but we were allowed to share our opinions. And it meant that because we felt safe doing so, and we felt safe to disagree, we could get to solutions much faster. So a lot of what I do with teams is getting them to be really clear on what's that shared objective that they have. Because when you have a shared objective, you know what you're working towards. And then when you're creating that cross-functional strategy, instead of doing it separately, you come together and you say, this is what we're trying to achieve. Who are our stakeholders? Which are the pain points? Now, who's best placed to achieve this? Who's best placed to address that gap? Because traditionally, maybe market access did more of the disease awareness, but perhaps going into more depth on a topic and educating around standards of care and disease awareness fits better with medical affairs based on their skill set. And the piece is that the medical affairs strategy should align with the marketing strategy. They don't overlap, but they should align and support each other so that medical affairs creates that foundation for the marketing message to land.
These barriers you are mentioning, they are sounding like rather artificial than real, right? So they mostly even built on fear and on historical isolation, aren't they?
It depends. If you've been through kind of that more traditional brand team where people don't get on as well, then you tend to carry that with you. Or there's a fear around compliance and what you can do. So I worked as a final signatory for a couple of years and in a compliance consultancy. And I realized that there were very few problems that couldn't have been solved at a much earlier time point with early communication. And I think the fear of doing things, or we perceive medical as saying no, or we perceive marketing as being too pushy. And actually, if we step back and say, what are we trying to do as a team and who is the best skill sets, then definitely it just makes it smoother. And I think sometimes people forget that as a team, we're trying to pull in the same direction. And it's that piece that really needs to click, and having those shared objectives.
It sounds like these two teams strategically and operationally need a lot of orchestration to start really working together, right? And I know that you have created the 8 Pillars framework, which is a practical blueprint for cross-functional alignment. It's very important that we have a little bit of this pillars here in our chat, so to make sure our listeners do understand in the nutshell what we are talking about. Can you bring a little bit more information, please, about those pillars?
Now, thank you for asking about this, Nataliya. So, yes, based on the work that I've done kind of in my career and over the last number of years, working in and with cross functional brand teams, their framework is called Catalyst. So, there are 8 pillars, and those 8 pillars are active collaboration and really active communication, clarity of purpose, which everything starts with that clarity of purpose, to be clear on your roles, to be clear on your responsibilities, on your objectives, and what you're trying to achieve as a team. So having that clear brand vision and the objectives that fall out of it. Then you have that active collaboration, and that means working together as a team, making sure that you're communicating the right things, because a lot of teams talk and communicate, but they're not communicating the right things. Then we have trust and empowerment. So it's very important that teams feel trusted and empowered to do the work that they do, and that there's trust and empowerment between the different functions. Then we have adaptable strategies, because for me, a lot of teams default to tactical planning, which isn't the same as taking that strategic outlook, which is more flexible and moves with the market's needs. Then we have leadership alignment, because again, when you're on a team, especially from a medical affairs perspective, you're often influencing without authority. So it's bringing the team with you. How do we get that alignment when everybody's coming from a slightly different standpoint? You have yielding success, or yielding results, which is really key. And this is where teams sometimes break down and you get a lot of friction, because what medical affairs is trying to do, their results play out over a longer time period. So they're trying to shift behaviors, which can take behaviors and beliefs, which can take kind of a year, 2 years, 3 years. Whereas sales and marketing are focused on sales numbers, which you're looking at on a monthly basis. And that's where disconnects can happen. So it's making sure you're yielding the right results, and then making sure you share that success. So typically in brand teams, medical affairs aren't really great at sharing what they do. And with a result, then the teams don't know what they're doing, and they think that medical aren't really contributing in the way that they are. And by sharing what you're doing, it actually allows the rest of the team to have visibility on your work. But also, eventually, when the team works together, you share success not as a function, but as a full cross functional brand team, and you celebrate every function's success as your own. And then there's that timely execution, because as a team and in such a fast paced environment as pharma, the quicker you move, the more important it is, so you don't miss valuable opportunities that translate into patient output.
I believe how amazing all these 8 steps are. And nowadays, they are becoming more and more important, that we do not forget to follow this guidance, especially in the age of AI, when we have so much acceleration from every space, right? So when the information is shared that fast, when we have the strategic planning, alignment, and sharing happening like faster and with better, quality even than before, then we can be closer. There are a lot of tools popping up here and there, which are aimed to connect commercial and medical communication. I know, like personally, there are a lot of new concepts, even like digital opinion leadership, with all this medical information online shared by doctors, by professors, so who are really supported by medical affairs organizations. So all of this is just on these crossroads of medical and commercial.
And you're right. And there are so many different ways that people are communicating and also consuming their information at the moment. And what's really important from a cross-functional team perspective is you're working towards one customer set at the end of the day and one set of patients. And therefore, your messages need to align, or at least if you have an omnichannel approach, it should be sequential, so that, as I said, that medical foundation, that people understand the disease area and the standards of care really well through the first piece, so that the commercial messaging can land on top of that. And also, you don't want to overload your customers. So it's really important that you're working together and knowing who's using which channels, and it's all, as you said, orchestrated so that it all goes very smoothly.
Exactly. This is the beauty of omnichannel and this collaboration. And since we are talking with both commercial and medical, recently I have asked a question: when is such collaboration has the biggest impact, and omnichannel strategies just answered me. So when we need to pivot between the messages because of science changed or the market changed, so there are two big reasons we have. Either there are new scientific facts, new trials, new reports delivered, or there is a market which is changing significantly. So the both aspects are very important, and we need to make sure that collaboration brings us this change pretty fast along with the technology.
Yes, and that's it. And that helps when everyone's aligned behind that shared common purpose. And again, with that trust and empowerment, that you can have those open conversations to keep everything on track.
Excellent. To make it more real for our listeners, I would ask you to give us 3 tips for leadership, for leaders starting this journey. So if someone in the beginning of this journey, what would be your recommendation?
So I would start with that, going back to that clarity of purpose or clarity of objectives. Sit down and get really clear on your objectives and what you're trying to do, and make sure they align with your cross-functional team's objectives. So sit down and make sure everybody's on the same page. Then I would take the time to think strategically, because one of the biggest challenges I hear from leaders is they don't have time to think strategically. But if you don't take the time to get clear on your objectives, then it's very difficult to prioritize. And then also being clear on your objectives, make sure you can communicate them clearly to your colleagues, because that will, make sure that all communication is much smoother. So it's having that clarity and objectives, prioritize your time, and then make sure your communications are landing. And by doing that is check in to make sure the other person understands what you're saying, because sometimes we speak slightly different languages, and that's where friction can occur.
That's totally true. So we shouldn't be territorial about where we are. We should share this collaboration philosophy in the sake of our patients, in the sake of delivering the true information and the true message in the right time where our patients needs us the most. So we are now coming to the very nice section, which is declaring a very short answers. I will pronounce a statement where you will answer me very shortly, hot or not. I have a couple of statements pre-prepared for you. So some of them are rather contradictory, some of them very smooth. So I'm bringing them one by one, and you please just react. If it is close to you, it is hot. If it is something you would rather never agree with, it will be not. So the first one. Medical affairs is now the most strategically important function in pharma.
I'd say not. It should be equal.
Thank you. The next one. You can't fix cross-functional alignment without fixing individual incentives first.
Not.
Absolutely not. The alignment is obvious, higher and more important. The next one. More strategic planning in pharma is still done in silos. As there we are working towards to break it. The next one. Trust is more important than process when it comes to cross-functional collaboration. Very hot. And the last one. The best cross-functional leaders are the ones who are willing to give up credit.
Very hot.
Thank you. Lara, thank you very much. So before we close, if you could leave some, to listeners, one thought for the future. So about what is really important and what you would change just like now, what it would be.
Be clear in your objectives and make sure you can communicate them clearly, because it honestly is a game changer.
Thank you so much. This is a perfect one. So with us today was Laragh De Bhulbh, the strategist, the person who is bringing together medical affairs and commercials to cross-functional collaboration and to strategizing together. So this good listener, listen of our clients and all of our customers to make sure that we are following the advices and we are collaborating, and in this collaborative mode creating more values for us, for patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nataliya.
Thank you, Lara.